Hello everyone and welcome back to the World Rapid Championship. We are going to show probably the most awaited clash of the event, Magnus Carlsen versus Alireza Firouzja, the player that is, supposed to challenge Magnus for the title. As you know, some time ago Magnus said that he will not be playing the World Chess Championship next cycle if Alireza here doesn't win the candidate. So quite a lot of pressure on the 18-year-old Alireza. Let's check out the game. It's quite an enjoyable one. So Magnus with the white pieces opens with e4. We have c6. Alireza goes for the Carlsen defense. He is famous for this by now. d4, d5, and already here on move 3, Magnus started thinking, and he thought for about a move before deciding on whether to go knight c3, knight to d2, whether to just capture, whether to f3. He goes e5. He goes for the advanced variation of the Carlsen. Bishop to f5, and now c4. Quite a rare idea. We have e6, and now knight to c3. We have knight to e7. The bishop will move, and then the knight is coming to this beautiful f5 square. And now Magnus plays h3. Now this is very, very rare, and it's sort of a waiting move. You want to see what the black will play. Knight to d7 by Alireza, knight to f3, and now there is a game where d captures on c4 was played, but Alireza plays bishop back to g6, prepares knight f5, and it is now as of move 7 that we have a completely new game. So let's see how Magnus approaches this. We have b3, and already Magnus spent quite a lot of time here. He's down to some 11 minutes, whereas Alireza basically spent no time. He has 14 and something minutes. So knight to f5, Magnus plays bishop to e2, and bishop to b4. Now developing the bishop with tempo, the knight here is undefended, so bishop to b2, and now both players castle. So castles, and now f6, challenging the central structure Magnus created here, and Magnus now challenges the bishop on b4. And here is the first time Alireza started spending some time. He spent almost 3 minutes on this on his next move, because you can't go here, you can't go here. If you go here, this could be very tricky. What if Magnus plays g4? Your knight will not be able to retreat to e7, so it could be very dangerous. Even though it's bad, but you will waste quite a lot of time, which Alireza no doubt did. For example, bishop to e7. If g4, you can even sacrifice this knight here. You can play f captures on e5, and after g captures on f5, bishop captures, and black will have a very nice attack against the white king. But Alireza probably decided that maybe it's too much. He played bishop to a5, and now c captures on d5. And here Alireza went for another deep thing, thinking for over 5 minutes, which is basically a third of his time in rapid time format. Well, do you capture with this pawn, or do you capture with this pawn? In the end, he decided to play c captures on d5. Both moves are of course possible, but he just wanted to choose the one that makes the most sense. Now this opens up the c file. He can play rook to c8. He will probably be able to open up the center. Then maybe bishop can come to c7, get the bishop on this diagonal, and so on. Magnus plays e captures on f6. We have queen captures on f6, and now rook to c1. Alireza plays knight to h4, challenges the knight on f3, and Magnus happily trades. We have knight captures, queen captures, and now Magnus, unlike some players that we show on this channel, knows the power of the b4 move, and he of course plays pawn to b4. This threatens the bishop, and well, where do you put the bishop? b6 or d8 are your moves. You do not want to put it on c8 in front of the rook here. So bishop all the way back to d8, and now bishop to g4. So this is what Magnus got out of the position. He has a very strong control over the c5 square. He has a nicely placed rook on the open c file, and he has the attack against the weak e6 pawn. This is a backwards pawn, and Magnus will now try to win it with moves like queen e2, rook e1, and he will try and go after this pawn. So bishop to f5, and now Magnus captures it. We have bishop captures. Now you can't capture with the pawn, or the d5 pawn falls. So rook captures on f5, and now queen e2. Magnus continues the attack on the weak e6 pawn. Knight to f8. This knight is now an excellent defender of the pawn, but it's not an excellently placed knight. It would be much better if this knight could go, for example, to b6 here, and then, you know, it would just be an excellent piece on c4. But for the moment it's on f8. And now, what do you play? Well, now Magnus needs to get his knight to e5 somewhere, and from there it's going to be a monster knight. Now, you could do this, for example, via the a4 square. You could play knight a4, knight to c5, knight to d3, knight to e5, or Magnus decides it's better via the d1 square, because after knight to e3, you will attack the rook, so you will win one tempo while maneuvering your knight. So here, bishop back to b6, putting pressure on the d4 pawn, and here knight to e3, first attacking the rook. Now, where do you move this rook? Wherever you move it, it's white will be able to attack it. If you move it to f7, just knight g4 to e5 will go after the f7 rook. If a rook f6, knight g4 already goes after the rook. So Alireza tried rook to g5, but this allows Magnus to, well, just unleash all the fury. He plays f4 now, attacks the rook here, rook to g3, and now Magnus plays the incredibly sneaky king to h2. He attacks the rook with his king, and he's preparing queen to f2, which will win the rook. You're not going to be able to get out of this. So Alireza quickly goes back, rook to g6, and now there are a couple of ways you could play this position, but there is one very particular way that should win you the game if you continue to play it like that. So feel free to pause the video and try to find the best move for white while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on playing, well, either the immediate f5 or preparing it with the g4, because both of them are incredibly strong. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, let's go with the g4. It's not what Magnus played, it's just what I'm going to show you. Now, what do you play here? Well, let's say you try h6, we're still gonna go forward with f5, and now after e captures on f5, knight captures on f5, attacking the queen, and well, once the queen moves, there is no defense against knight to e7 check. This will check the black king and also win the rook here, so there's really nothing you can do here, and this will be winning for white. So this is one way to do it, but Magnus decides that it's also giving black a little bit too much, because for the moment, black doesn't have any threats, and this knight is a very strong piece. So Magnus first goes knight to g4. He still wants to get his outpost with knight to e5. Queen back to d8 by Alireza, and now a4. Now preparing to further expand on the queen side, saying, okay, Alireza, you've got nothing here on the king side. Bishop to c7, excellently placed as the king is on h2, and now b5. We have bishop to d6, and now rook to c3. Magnus now prepares to double up on the c file, rook to c8, and now rook captures on c8. We have queen captures, and finally knight to e5, attacking the rook here. So rook to f6, Alireza still not ready to capture on e5, as that would really help Magnus. So rook to c1 now, attacking the queen, queen to d8, and g3 now, strengthening the f4 pawn. And now you will try to do something on the queen side. So here, rook to f5 and queen to d3 now. And here Alireza plays g5. Alireza had the right idea, although first you kind of want to capture the knight here. Bishop captures, d captures, and then g5. This makes sense, and it will help you in opening, up some sort of an attack towards the white king. But he played g5 right away, and this allows Magnus knight to g4. Now threatening knight to h6 to win the rook here on f5. So king to g7, and now knight to e3, attacking the rook, and Magnus is now down to 4 minutes, whereas Alireza is already under a minute. So rook back to f7, now comes f5, and here it's not easy to play this. If you capture this, knight captures on f5 check, it's incredibly unpleasant for black, a hard position to play. So of course you don't want to do this. Alireza adds another defender. He plays queen to d7, and now Magnus adds another attacker, rook to f1. We have h6, but now king to g2. Again, a very unpleasant move, getting the king away from this diagonal. So king to g8, but now just knight to g4. Now you're threatening knight captures on h6. You also have more control over the f6 square, and there's just not a good move for Alireza here. g7 was played, king g7, now f6 check. Of course, you cannot go to g6 or h7. So king to h8, now Magnus just picks up the h6 pawn. Rook to h7, knight back to g4, and now queen to e8, trying to get some sort of some sort of an attack here, but it's not going to be easy. We have bishop to a3, attacking the bishop. So bishop captures, queen captures, and again, the black queen cannot move because the knight is hanging here. So queen to c8, trying to get some sort of a counter idea with queen to c2 check, but just rook to c1, forcing the black queen to move. Queen to e8, now comes knight to e5, and it's completely hopeless for Alireza here. King to g8, we have queen to f3. Magnus could even push f7 right away, but he doesn't want to give up his knight for a rook, so just preparing it. Queen to f3, now comes queen d8, getting out of harm's way, and now rook to f1, adding more pressure to the f-file. King to h8, now comes queen e3. First Magnus defends the f6 pawn, only now he goes after the g5 pawn. So queen to c8, but Magnus not even allowing queen to c2 check. He plays rook f2, now comes g4. Alireza trying everything to open up some lines, but Magnus just plays h5. Rook to h5, but here just knight to f7 check, and it was in this position on move 52 that Alireza Firouzja resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. To give you an example how the game might continue, let's say king g8, we're gonna go knight d6, we're gonna attack the queen, and once the queen moves, we're gonna play f7 check, and once the king moves, we're gonna play knight to e8. Now we're threatening knight f6 with this monster fork. Everything will get forked, and you can't defend against everything. If queen e7, we still deliver this fork. King g6, knight captures, and for example, if king captures, we can just play queen e5 check, and you are getting checkmated here. King g6, you're gonna play queen to h8, now prepare h5, and there really is no move here. Knight h7, for example, h5 check, king h6, we're gonna play f8 queen, and that's it. Captures, the knight cannot move, and very quickly it's all going to be over. Rook f6 check, you're going to play captures with check, and now after king g5, really anything, or maybe queen h4 will be checkmate. So I know you guys enjoy it when I show you how the game might end, so this is one of the lines that could have happened if the game continued. But after knight f7 check, Alireza resigned, and another incredibly important victory for Magnus Carlsen, who is now on 6 points out of 7, and I don't know who else won in the previous round who was on 6 points, but Magnus is either winning alone or sharing first place with someone for the moment. So we'll see what happens next in the tournament, but Alireza misses his chance here for a nice win against Magnus. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank Checkmate Epilepsy, Catherine Matriarch, Jack Schroeder, Jeffrey Redenor, and David Kimura for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of this amazing tournament until it finishes. Thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.